after trade. This is a good time to kind of have this conversation. So I'm looking forward to hearing from my co-panelists and questions from the audience. So thank you, Sheila.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Uche. Next, I will be introducing Anthony Kamau from Kenya. Anthony Mushene Kamau is a seasoned international trade consultant and a driving force behind trade automation in East Africa. He is armed with a Master of Laws in International Trade Law and an MBA in Finance. Anthony has spent over a decade shaping how trade moves across borders, and from his pivotal role in implementing the Kenya's single window system at Kentrade Africa to advising on AfCFTA readiness for the Indian Ocean Commission and Trademark Africa, his impact has been felt across various sectors in East Africa and beyond. So whether it's automating custom processes or simplifying compliance, Anthony is a catalyst for smarter, faster, and secure trade. Anthony, please let's hear your voice.
Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Anthony, and thank you, Sheila, for a wonderful introduction. Glad to meet all my panelists, and thank you, everyone, for joining. I think this conversation is timely, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Glad to have you here. And to my third panelist of the day, Ifeoma Abdullahi. Ife is a distinguished trade finance specialist with over 17 years of expertise in structured trade finance, correspondent banking, and cross-border business development. As the head of trade finance at Stanbic Bank Nigeria, Ife leads strategic initiatives that help businesses, especially SMEs, navigate the complexities of international and intra-African trade. Her deep proficiency in letters of credit, bills for collection, and regulatory frameworks is very instrumental in expanding Africa's trade footprint, especially under the AfCFTA. And with an MBA from the Business School, Netherlands, she is a recognized advocate for trade innovation, financial inclusion, and building resilient cross-border ecosystems. Ifeoma, please, let's hear your voice.
Thank you, Sheila. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm looking forward to an interactive session today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ife, for that introduction. Please, if you're joining, please mute yourself so that you can have a conducive environment to have today's discussion. Thank you so much to our panelists. These are indeed people with a wealth of wisdom, expertise, and knowledge in the topic that we will be discussing today. And I will kickstart our, sorry about that, I will kickstart our meeting or our webinar today. And I think I will start with us agreeing on the fact that there are a lot of activities in Africa. Very many businesses are doing a great work at innovating and scaling and bringing in new ideas to spearhead the continent ahead in business and everything trade. But now we can agree that we have roadblocks that all have been coming in, and that is what has been making Africa, as much as we have a lot of opportunity in the business sector, we've been lagging behind because of some of these challenges. And so today we will be discussing these roadblocks, we will be discussing the solutions and the bold opportunities in order to reshape Africa's trade future and to ensure that we are having a seamless trade environment for African businesses to thrive. And so this discussion today, as Uche said, is very pivotal, especially the fact that we are at a very pivotal time as regards regulation across Africa and growth across different sectors, business sectors in Africa. And so this is quite a very pivotal discussion that we'll be having today. And so I will dive right into the questions. So I'll start with you, Mr. Anthony Kamau. You've worked extensively across East Africa's logistic corridors. From where you sit, what are the most persistent pain points that businesses face when moving goods across borders?
Thank you, Sheila. Wonderful question. I'll start off by defining the kind of challenges that we do face as private sector when trying to trade across the borders, especially in an African context. Yes, we have a lot of interventions that have gone on, but there are two types of challenges that we are facing. One is the tariff barriers. These are tax-related barriers or government customs-related taxes barriers. Then the non-tariff barriers. These are the ones that are mostly due to infrastructure, bottlenecks, and so on and so on. So going on to tariff barriers, we are quite in unprecedented times. If you spoke to me last 2 years, we would not seem to think about tariff barriers as a big challenge because we've signed a lot of free trade agreements. And over almost 100 years since the World Trade Organization and the Bretton Woods, we have been working towards reducing the tariff barriers. These are the taxes for imports or exports. But what has happened in the last few weeks, and everyone can see with the Trump announcement of the tariffs to African countries, to China, trade wars, and so on, we are living in unprecedented times where these tariffs are coming back. But going mostly to the non-tariff barriers that we do face, and this is when you're exporting or importing, whether to Europe, whether to US, or whether to the next African country, we have the issues of multiplicity of the regulatory agencies. There's no trade you'll do without having to face several government agencies, whether you have the single window system or not. The design of international trade is that it's regulated by multiple agencies, whether for health purposes, migration, security, health purposes. There's always that multiplicity. And this adds to the time and cost that you need to process your documentation across borders. And this sometimes can be a long delay or a source for a challenge for anyone who's trying to trade across borders. The other one is infrastructural. As an African continent, we still have different levels of development. If you want to ship from here to West Africa, there's no direct road or linkages between the two countries, let's say Ghana and Kenya. So you need to use several modes of transport, ship using a ship, then the road, the rail, and so on and so on. So there's also the issues of our ports are not performing to the level that they are supposed to be. There's congestion of the ports, there's poor roads, infrastructure, networks, potholes, and so on and so on. So that also adds to the time and cost when you're doing the business. Then there's a limited coordination between the border agencies, whether you have a one-stop border at each border, whether you have the free trade agreements, there still lacks communication, proper communication and coordination between the border agencies. Today I must for this documentation for the same trade, tomorrow I must for different documentation. And this adds again to the time that you're doing this trade across the borders. One of the things that have been in discussions recently is the mutual recognitions. When you're talking about standards, when you're talking about conformity, is a product from Kenya acceptable with the same standards in another country? We've seen this, especially when you're trying to export to European countries. Product will be kicked back because it's said to have a lot of pesticides, or it's not meeting the quality or standards that it's supposed to be, even though it was passed by the standards agencies in Kenya. There's no mutual recognition of the standards. And it's the same when you're trying to export to the US. And these are some of the discussions that are going on within the African free trade area, where we can have mutual recognition and reduction of these trade barriers. Then there's the manual processing of the paperwork. One country has the automation where you can apply your documents online. The next country, you need to do the printouts and so on and so on. I'll give an example where when you're shipping from Kenya to Congo, you go through Kenya, Uganda, then you reach to Congo, you're being asked for some documentation that was not asked in the two other countries. And this, again, poses a huge bottleneck. There are quite myriad of issues, whether tariff now or non-tariff, but I'll start there maybe on a highlight. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I totally agree with the challenges that you highlighted, because it's one of the things we have seen even as Yogupe. And so even before we move to the next questions, I think I'd like to give you a follow-up question on that, because we have said that we're not just here to discuss challenges, we're here to also help give solutions. So these challenges are there. Is there anything that is being done about it? So a follow-up question I will add to you on that is, how can governments and private sectors, since most of the challenges you've mentioned, tariff barriers, multiplicity of regulatory of regulation across different borders or different nations. You've mentioned infrastructure, and there is, the manual processing of paperwork and all that. So is there a way governments and the private sector or private sector players, for example, Yogupe, we are a private sector player in international trade. Is there a way we can align to remove the challenges you have mentioned?
Thank you, Sheila. On the multiplicity of the stakeholders, there has been some trade facilitation efforts, whether it's automation or a review of the laws and policies to reduce the number of government agencies intervening. There's a circular around 2019 in Kenya where the government directed that only these government agencies, like top four of them, can be able to intervene on this. Again, the automation has really assisted because now it gives transparency and knowledge of what is supposed to be done. I'm supposed to apply for this agency, next is this, and the other one is this. Then there's an alignment of who is supposed to intervene on what. Before, someone could just wake up and say, I want to intervene on this, and you can't do anything as a trader, you need to comply. And now there's a standardization, there's communication, and there's harmonization. What I urge a lot of the stakeholders is that communication is key rather than having those silo-based communication that a trader is not aware and it's not transparent. On infrastructure, this is both a government issue and a private stakeholder issue because government does not have limitless resources because it takes a lot to build a road, it takes a lot to have rail and so on and so on. So there has been a lot of discussions, whether it's at donor space, whether at African Union space, where you can have inter-country or multi-country development of infrastructure, a road that connects from south to north of Africa or from east to west of Africa, or rail that is connecting the two countries or two sides of the continent. And this will take up this takes strategies that is harmonized in budgeting that countries can be able to invest in this. And finally, on issues of payment, there's a lot of challenges paying across borders when you're trading. And again, Yogupe, I know, is in this space. When you sell your goods across the borders, the exchange rate, the lack of currency is a big challenge, and the settlement and lack of security in settlement is a huge challenge. And again, there has been some development in terms of this space. The Afrexim Bank is coming up with a payment system that will assist with this. I know Yogupe and other private stakeholders are doing this to assist with the real-time settlement in the currency, in local currency versus the exchange rate, and this reduces the risk and the turnaround time of the payments.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was well explained. Thank you so much for offering the solutions that are currently ongoing in the fintech and government landscape. So that is really helpful. Thank you for that, Anthony. Next, I will go to you, Ms. Abdul. Very many African SMEs are doing an incredible work. There is no doubt about that. But there is a constraint on limited access to trade finance. And you being a player in trade finance, especially at the Stanbic Bank Nigeria, what models or innovations could help to level the playing field to help businesses, especially the SMEs, to scale?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sheila. And yes, you are right. Access to trade finance is a major bottleneck for SMEs. Despite the potentials of SMEs. So if we even speak to the form about 90% of the businesses on the continent, right? They contribute about 50 to 60% on employment, contribute to the GDP of a lot of countries, but yet for the so to your question as to what kind of innovations or models that we've seen that can work for the SME business. I'll just speak to maybe a few. One of them is the supply chain finance model. So most times, the financial institutions don't want to take a risk on the SME, either because the business is so small or, they don't want to, you don't have some form of collateral or you don't have what it requires for the financial institution's risk appetite. So, we can then look at the supply chain finance model where the banks lend to the SMEs on the basis of the corporates, the larger corporates that they are servicing. So at Stanbic IBTC, we have actually implemented this model and we have quite a number of SMEs that are enjoying this facility now. So it will leverage on the creditworthiness of the larger buyer, and then it reduces the risk that is being taken on the SME. Some other ways that we can level that playing ground for them is also to employ the credit insurance scheme or credit insurance program, and it helps the lender, reduces the risk against non-payment of those SMEs because the financial institution will then get insurance covering non-payments by those SMEs. So it makes it a little bit less risky lending to the SME business. We can also talk about partnering with fintechs, partnering with DFIs, that's Development Finance Institution. In Nigeria, we have a couple of them. We have the Bank of Industry, we have the Development Bank of Nigeria, and at Stanbic, we can partner with these banks to give funds at a lower rate and funds that you can apply to SMEs, and then provide risk capital, de-risking the private lender, and also expanding SME credit. So I think that some of those, there's also the fact of credit scoring, using alternative data, because for most SMEs, they don't really have the financials up to date, or they don't have the credit history that you're looking for. But we could use other methods, right? And for example, their sales record, access to the services, or maybe if you ever want to use the transaction data that the company has done, to kind of assess the volumes or the turnover that SME, engages in, and then it will also help the financial institution to appraise the SME and know whether it's bankable and, give them finances. So those are some of the ways that I think that we can employ to encourage SMEs to access to finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abdul. Thank you for explaining that very well. Now I want to move to, regulatory bottlenecks and compliance, which is a conversation Anthony began when he mentioned the multiplicity of regulation across different borders. To you, Dr. Uche, regulations across African borders vary wildly at that. We have even heard from what Anthony has said. From your legal lens, what are the most urgent areas do you think we need to harmonize, especially now that we have e-commerce and digital trade on the rise?
Yeah. Thank you. So I'd say I'll speak broadly, then narrow it down a bit to one or two kind of areas. So you can think about cross-border payments, in terms of infrastructure harmonization is necessary, regulatory harmonization in that regard is necessary. So aligning regulations that are related to payment systems can help reduce risks that are associated with money laundering, terrorist financing. But I think also even about areas such as data governance, cybersecurity, intellectual property rights, there are those areas, particularly, I'll give an example of data governance. So we need reports that the movement of data, because while ensuring at the same time that data protection and privacy. So there's a need to prioritize this sort of alignment or harmonization of laws, especially in cross-border data flow. So I'm using that as one example. And just because it can help, especially because of AFTA, you know, the AFCFTA, if you want to drive the AFTA, it's important to have that. But we know that there are national agendas. We know that those are often prioritized, making it challenging, you know, to have that harmonization. And if you want to drive innovation and with AI development as well, we kind of need accessible and shareable data, right? Is something that is essential for the growth and success of any digital economy. It will enable innovations, economic opportunities, and in this rapidly evolving landscape. And I'm thinking of what my, you know, what my colleague has talked about with SMEs, how they can help SMEs. If in Nigeria, if the SMEs that they are helping, for example, are just in Nigeria, but you know, SMEs might be trading in other places. You want on a broader kind of level, you want harmonization of laws that is the same requirements that they have in Nigeria and in, you know, Ghana, if they go to Ghana, or if they go to you know, Nairobi or Kenya or where it is. So even if you look at in terms of frameworks, even when there is harmonization in Africa, one thing we find is that the digital policies are often inconsistently applied at the national level. So we know that member states implement restrictive measures like data localization and limit free flow of data. But if anybody has had a look at the digital trade protocol, you will see that one of the areas that the digital trade protocol talks about is data localization. It forbids data localization, and that's a positive thing. But there are concerns, you know, with even cross-border data flows, especially because of what the US did last year with their own laws. But if you look at on a policy-wide level, so on a continental level, there is no single continental policy, for example, on cross-border data flows, you know, but you can, what you will find is that there are clear synergies among various digital policies and legal frameworks. Each instrument, for example, will target specific policy objectives, but they complement each other. So you find that what we will have is collectively, they present a sort of a coherent framework or approach to Africa's cross-border data sharing with strong emphasis on data protection as well, you know, and security. So if you look at, so one thing I would say, if you if you look at something like the Malabo Convention, so the Malabo Convention and the AU Data Policy Framework, you will find that they are all aligned in terms of what they require for cross-border data flows. And you would find that there are guiding rules to facilitate it with an emphasis on trust and security of personal data. A problem, I would say, is whilst you see on a continental level, right, we have these laws that are synergized in terms of cross-border data flow, we would have at the regional level. So if you look at regional economic communities, their policies have you know, they've primarily concentrated on regulating personal data and protecting the rights of data subjects. Yes, but what we want is for all these laws to come together, and the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol does that. Another thing I want to talk about, apart from cross-border kind of data flows, is if you want to think about in terms of cybersecurity regulations, you know, data protection regulations, they can be more predictable, and they can create, if they are harmonized, they can be more predictable and create a secure environment for businesses. We know that cybersecurity is a big issue in Africa. We know that some of our legacy systems are outdated. So having laws, updated laws that can create harmony is important in that area. So if you look at, there can also be areas of, you know, connectivity. In that area, I would say that's kind of more infrastructure development, you know, having that, but you know, I wouldn't go into that too much, but that's also something that when you have connectivity, it makes it easier to kind of trade, but also with connectivity and more open borders, you find that laws would then help drive trade. So, I mean, these are sort of areas I will talk about. One area that I don't know if people are very much aware of is so there's this model law on electronic transferable records, is the UN model law on electronic transferable records, and it's about authenticity of online kind of transactions. For example, Nigeria, late last year, Nigeria has a law that is similar to the M letter, but you will find some of that in the AFCFTA. So there is alignment, there is harmonization, but it's like Nigeria is pursuing its own goals in terms of electronic transferable records, drawing on the M letter, because if you do a comparison, you see that there are differences. Then you see the digital trade protocol, it has some similarity, but I mean, this is a question I'm opening up for everybody that wants to have a look at this. You know, you kind of wonder if the digital trade protocol is there and they've taken some parts of the AFCFTA, and Nigeria is trying to push her bill on, you know, the e-governance bill that has the M letter. It is when Nigeria kind of you know, passes that law and is in place, and the digital trade protocol is adopted, do we then need to start reforming it again to kind of into the digital trade protocol, the AFCFTA, because that's part of implementation? So those are some of the things that you can find that countries are pursuing their own things in digital trade, or an aspect of kind of e-commerce or trust or authentication, without necessarily thinking of synergizing with the broader framework. So I don't, this is, so even though I've presented some of these areas, you know, these are also areas that people can think about a little bit and think, okay, what is Nigeria trying to do in terms of this, and how does it fit into the AFCFTA? So this is my kind of take.
Thank you so much, Uche. I think we will continue with that conversation later, especially with how regulations keep changing. So it's a thing that's always ongoing. So I think we'll have that conversation later, even as we proceed with this webinar, so that we know now what happens whenever regulations change, whenever there are shifts. How can business, you know, be up to speed with the varying regulations each and every time? But now I'll go back to Mr. Kamau. When I looked at your portfolio, I saw that you were very instrumental in implementing the single window system at Kentrade Africa. Could you kindly walk us through the single window system? Tell us what lessons you learned when that was implemented, and how can it apply, or how can it be applied in other African countries to ensure that we harmonize customs and compliance frameworks more effectively? Because I think even from the research I've seen, that is one of the bottlenecks that really affect businesses. And from where you sit or where you stand, I know you know how compliance, any breach of compliance could cost a business millions of money. So what do you think about that?
Thank you, Sheila. I'll just give a nutshell on what is a single window, because it's a buzzword in a trade facilitation space. The single window system is a platform which links the government agencies and the traders or the private sector who are seeking government services. If you want to export, if you want to import, you need to apply for certain documentation, permits, licenses, payment of fees in regards to international trade. So the single window system is a recommendation from World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement. And again, these were foreseen to be what building blocks can we have to make trading better across borders. Can we have a single entry of all the documentation when you want to apply for an import license or an export license? So that's in a nutshell is a single window system. It's just a web-based platform which links government agencies to the traders that are trying to seek for services for export or import. Yeah, Kenya started implementation of the single window system around 2010, and it went live around 2014, and we recently celebrated 10 years of the single window system. And what this has done, it has really reduced the time taken to apply for permits. There is transparency, there is a visibility of where your permit is. You can be able to reach out to the government agencies, and you can be able to trace where your document is. Prior to this, it used to be very complicated, because you need to walk in one government agency to the next. And you know, the more there is face-to-face, there's a prone to corruption, delays, loss of information, and so on and so on. So the single window system has brought about the transparency, reduced the cargo clearance times, And of course, integrated government agencies to stop working in silos. And now there's more coherence in cargo clearance along the Kenyan borders. So again, this has not been the smoothest ride, if I can tell you, because uh, when we started implementation of the single window system, it was such a new phenomenon. No many countries have done it. Even now, when speaking, I think only less than 10 countries have done it in Africa, and we still continue to learn this. So one thing you need at that level is you need to have a political will. At presidential or prime minister level, you need to have political will to implement this, because you need to allocate budgets. You need to whip the government agencies and the ministries relevant to international trade to go along with the single window system. Otherwise, you'll be implementing the single window system and another government agency is doing another different thing, and this does not have the cohesiveness that you need. Then you need to involve the private sector. The private sector is the driver of the international trade. You must involve them for this change. Change is not an easy thing. You need to brief them the benefits and why it's working the way it is working. If there's an introduction of new fees or anything else, you need to brief them on why it's important for them to be on board on the single window system. Then again, you need to align this with the regional ambitions, whether it's at the regional community, economic communities level, whether it's at the African continental level, or so on and so on. So that when you're implementing a single window system, it can be compatible with your neighbors and your regional economic community. So then again, you need to provide adequate training to the government agencies, to the private stakeholders, and all the other stakeholders that are involved. Otherwise, you'll end up having a very wonderful tool, but it's not being implemented fully because people do not really get what it is. So we have documented these lessons. We continue having these conversations at UN level. We have submitted our lessons learned. We have seen growth in African countries in interest of automating their customs and trade processes, and the journey continues. Now it has gone even to the level of building a single window system for the shipping lines, where we call it maritime single window system, because trade happens alongside logistics and shipping routes and so on and so on. So we want to have that also automated so that you can be able to trace from the source all the way to the delivery of the products through the single window system. Thank you, Sheila.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think from what you have said, one thing I'm taking away is what you said. The private sector is the driver of international trade. And so there needs to be synergy between the private sector and government to ensure that while there is the plan, the private sector is also very instrumental in ensuring that the plan actually gets to manifestation, actually. So that is very important as well. Thank you for that.
Yes.
I think we've been
and maybe I can
hearing.
add, Sheila, before you move.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the private stakeholder, not in this facet, now we're not only talking about the traders themselves, the guys who are doing the export or imports. We're also talking about the other facilitators in the private sector, the banks, the insurance, the providers of transport. You must bring them on the single window system so that there is a seamless provision of trade end to end. We've been trying now to work on our products to assist with the credit facility, where you can be able to access the single window system. And there is a traceability, and the paperwork that you've used on the single window system will be used as the evidence. And this discussion has been taken up by AFDB, the African Development Bank, on how to provide trade facilitation and trade facilities for financing for the SMEs so that they can be able to trade easily across the borders.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony, for that addition. Thank you so much. I know for the people who joined us, thank you for joining. I know you've been hearing us mention a buzzword, AFCFTA. And so I want us to go into that, and I'll start with Uche. I'd like you to help our audience or people who may not be knowledgeable about the AFCFTA and tell us, a few years into the AFCFTA implementation, what is working, what is not working, what needs to happen especially now in the current landscape we are in, to ensure that the AFCFTA fulfills its full potential in boosting not just international trade, but also intra-African trade?
Yeah. So thank you, Sheila. So AFCFTA, I think, is a very critical kind of aspect of trade now in Africa. So the way that I would best describe it is, so it has a lot of, I will start with the potential. Well, first is a flagship project of the African Union. So it's one of the critical projects that they are implementing in looking at 2060 agenda. And the AFCFTA is really the largest trading area in the world, just because the number that we have in Africa. And it was established in 2018. I think that's important to kind of know. But trading actually began in 2021. It has several protocols, but I think for purposes of what we're kind of looking at, one of the key protocols would be well, they're all really kind of important, but I think one area that people are more interested in recently is the digital trade protocol. But if you are thinking of the AFCFTA, you want to think about harmonization, you want to think about unification, because it's seeking to create a unified market across the African continent. Most people already know that in Africa, trade is really between African and non-African countries, and it's cheaper. So what the AFCFTA is trying to do is promote trade and boost intra-African trade. And projections are very high about AFCFTA. It says that it's a pivotal opportunity for to diversify economies and enhance industrialization. It has the potential to increase intra-African trade at least by 45% in 2045. So that's really a big deal. That's something we want to go for. If the AFCFTA is well implemented, and we're going to go into it now, and then what you're going to have is that it's going to change Africa's kind of position and promote industrialization, job creation, investment, and things like that, and lift millions out of poverty. I think that's one of the biggest things that the World Bank stated, that it has the opportunity or the possibility of lifting millions of Africa out of poverty. So, but in terms of the areas, the agreement covers various areas like conflict resolution, so infrastructure development, agricultural development, trade, and it encompasses all 55 member states of the African Union. So in terms of what is what I would say is working right now, I would say, well, you can say that there is something like one, the number of states that have ratified the AFCFTA. I think because I think there are about 53 now. I should really double check that just to be more precise and make sure that I'm not giving anything wrong. But there is something also called, in terms of achievements, is the Guided Trade Initiative, which has expanded to include 37 of 54 member states. So that's something that is working. So that agreement includes a focus on trade facilitation and regional value chains. It has, I mentioned now that it has 37 member states. So a growing number of countries are actively participating in AFCFTA trade. And if you look at trade facilitation, so the Secretariat, the AFCFTA Secretariat, is actively working on projects and tools that support trade facilitation, and they are addressing adjustment costs, monitoring trade flows, facilitating cross-border trade as well. Then if you look at rules of origin, which is something that is very important, we're talking of export and import, you're thinking about negotiations which determine, those are negotiations that would determine which products can benefit from after preferences. And these negotiations are progressing with a high percentage of tariff already agreed upon. So that was one of the biggest issues with the AFCFTA, whether people would agree, to the tariff lines. But now we know at least that there's progress in that area. Then if you look at trading goods, at least 43 countries have submitted their tariff concessions and negotiations that on the accompanying after protocols, which are ongoing. So I mean, these are kind of progress that we know, but progress in these things are different to implementation. And Sheila, you asked a really good question. What needs to happen in terms of what should we kind of do to make sure that is working, fulfill its full potential in boosting intra-African trade. So I would say in terms of recommendations, so one thing is that there is some sort of implementation. So for example, if you have partial implementation, there is benefits to that, and people are recording, some countries are saying, okay, we've done some form of implementation here and there. But if you full implementation of the AfTA is what is important if we're going to enjoy the full benefits of the AfTA, right? So, and it requires like strategic investments, well-designed policies. You want synchronized reforms at national, sub-regional, and continental levels. So is what I was saying about Nigeria, what Nigeria is doing with the e-governance bill, the e-governance and digital bill, the 2024 one, and what we have under the digital trade protocol. I'm just saying that this is the time that when we're pushing any particular law, we should make sure that it aligns properly, because it's tedious to pass laws in some of our countries. You want to make sure that it aligns with the AfTA. That's what implementation is. And I'm saying it in just a very practical term. But let us look at now what should really happen. So I would say that government should prioritize the full implementation of the AfCFTA. It really is government that would do it. So you can't leave that to private sector and say, okay, get on with it. Whatever you want to do is fine. No, it is government. And to do that, it includes reducing tariffs, eliminating non-tariff barriers. And our colleague was talking about it, Anthony, just in the first question, when he was talking about the barriers that are coming up now. Trade policies, as I mentioned, needs to be harmonized, and this means that they need to strengthen the national AfCFTA implementation committees. So they have that and, enhance private sector engagement. So let me draw from a practical, there is a project that we were trying to work on with the Afrexim Bank. And a key focus of the project, a key thing that we're trying to say is that a lot of private sector and a lot of businesses are not even too aware of the AfCFTA and how they can use it. So there are a lot of gaps. So if you focus on private sector engagement, you would find that implementation will be possible. Will be not what the word I'm looking for is not possible, but implementation will be kind of easier and faster. So you would have more people driving and kind of saying, okay, we want this policy because we want to engage in trade in Africa. I want to be able to sell shea butter in Ghana, not just Nigeria. Then, in terms of climate policies, climate is a big deal in Africa. So you want to integrate climate policies into AfTA's implementation, including through investments in renewable energy. That's something that is important. Then we want to streamline customs procedures. Again, Anthony is well able to he's been in that field. So we want to streamline custom procedures and adopt digital technologies like, I would say, AI, blockchain, electronic data processing to reduce trade costs and improve efficiency. So if we invest in digital infrastructure, what will happen is that you will include things like the broadband networks, data centers, internet exchange points to support trade and innovation. And then there's a need to have also gender-sensitive policies under the AfCFTA. This would help if you have the policies and it's spread across countries. Is also a way to facilitate implementation. But one thing I do want to say is that the key thing, if I'm kind of talking, if I'm going on and on, the key thing I do want to say is that full implementation of AfTA just requires that state parties reform their laws and institutions in accordance with what AfTA requires, what the agreement requires, because it's a binding agreement, okay? It's a binding agreement, so it's important. And you need to carry a comprehensive review of domestic policies, laws and administrative practices, identify the gaps, and then take appropriate measures to ensure regional conformity of national laws with AfTA requirements. So for this purpose, again, I would emphasize AfTA Secretariat is important. If you want to, if you want to really, or if we want to really benefit from the after. What will do this is implementation. It's just implementation, and implementation is law reform. And I go back to the question, I'm putting to the audience, anybody that, is into research, or anybody that wants to ask anything, any law that any country is trying to pass, people can have a look, because sometimes countries get very ambitious, very excited about passing new laws. It makes sense, but there is no kind of the assessment of whether the law fits into what is currently working under the AFTA, because people are not even very much aware of AFTA and what is needed. So I would say those are some of the things that are working. AFTA has a lot of potentials. I've mentioned some of the potentials, lifting people out of poverty, industrialization, innovation. Then there are things that are working. Countries have submitted kind of rules of origin, and there's progress in that light, guided trade initiative. But what is not working is implementation. That's the area that needs more work, not what is not working. You can find one or two countries implementing them, but the pace is slow. So I mean, this is it for me. I do hope that I was able to talk about after a bit. If you need any clarification, I'm here to answer questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Uche. That was very comprehensive. Kwaku, I have seen your question in the chat box. We will be having a proper Q&A session at the end of this discussion. So I am acknowledging it. We will answer it at the end of this session. Anyone else who has a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat box so that we have a good time for discussion and then a later time for questions. And as Uche, as you were talking, I was very keen on the implementation, because there is something that Kenyans say, and I think I'll say it and then translate it for you. We normally say, kwa ground vitu ni different, to mean that on the ground, things are different. You've been talking about very many various policies that the FCFTA has put on board. And so when we say kwa ground vitu ni different, what we mean is, are the policies being perceived or being implemented on the ground, or do they just remain on paper? And so even as I want to stick on implementation, I want to go back to Mr. Kamau. There's been a lot of excitement, especially among various regional bodies around the AFCFTA. But also I would be honest and say there's a bit of confusion on the ground. Like I said, qua ground, there's confusion. How do we ensure that a business person in Nairobi, a business person in Accra, Ghana, a business person in Kigali, Rwanda, truly understands the benefits from the AFCFTA agreement, and not just understanding, but also benefits? And while on that as well, I'd like you to tell us, do you think digital communication and education play a part here to ensure that me, who is selling a certain product or exporting a certain product in Nairobi, I understand how I can leverage the AFCFTA to my advantage as a business person?
Thank you, Sheila. Yes, kwa ground written different. I'll echo your words, because we always get these accusations from especially when you sit in government, that we go to Geneva, we go to Accra, we go to Addis, negotiate very nice policies, sign off the trade agreements, then we come back and we don't talk about them. And this has been a challenge. Uche has talked about the guided trade initiative. And this has come about because the African Union, through the FCFTA, has realized we cannot gain traction if we keep signing these wonderful policies and wonderful initiatives if the private sector is not involved. And the key issue has been awareness. It's almost 2-3 years now since we went live with the FCFTA, but the traction has been very little. And this comes about because, first of all, at government level, the ratification time is very slow. The government bureaucracies needs to go to the parliament, cascaded to the relevant parastatals, then businesses will start trading with it. But now there has not been enough. You need to be aware. If I'm selling to Accra, if I'm selling to Yaoundé, or I'm selling to Addis as a Kenyan producer, I need to know if the market exists. I need to know the size of the market. I need to know what are the tariffs, the trades that I need to, trade barriers that I may incur, or the rules that I may use to go about it. And yes, we have been doing some training of the private sector. Over the last financial year, we've been working with the county governments in Kenya, in Makueni, in Kajiado, in Kericho. And this is areas that are producing some of the products that we feel they can be sold across border, and training them how they can be able to take advantage of this initiative. How can, if I am selling oranges, if I'm selling coffee, if I'm selling tea, how can I get customers, customer acquisition? How can I ship, and how can I sell to the rest of Africa? Again, we need to continue education. And you have spoke when you talk about digitization of this communication and democratization of it. Similar to what we've done with the mobile payment. It just caught fire. Around 10, 20 years ago, we did not have the way we have prevalence of mobile money. But now in almost every African country, we have mobile money. And it's the same thing we need to know about AFCFTA if it's going to take root in our trading circle. Everyone needs to be, again, we need to build channels, we need to build e-commerce platforms, we need to have payments and settlement programs that assist us to sell easily. And this is SMEs. We're not talking about 5, 6 big companies that in every African countries. We're talking about the 90, 80% SMEs that do produce and do sell, do want to sell across borders. So again, we invite stakeholders, we invite private sector to continue with the education on AFCFTA, because it cannot be left to the governments or the African Union. Again, the government is not very good at marketing itself. We sign these programs, we don't market them, or we don't tell the people what's happening. They end up on the shelf and they're not implemented. Yeah. So this is one of the channels we can use to train and teach our SMEs how to take advantage of this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. Ms. Abdul, you've been quiet here. Back to you. From your experience, can you share how trade finance institutions, especially from where you work or where you head, how are these institutions adapting their models to align with the goals of the AFCFTA? And what role, as Anthony was saying, we need also the private sector to come in and help in educating the masses. What roles can fintech platforms and, for example, Yogupi, what role can we play in filling the financial inclusion gaps?
Okay, hi, thank you, Sheila. Yes, I've been quiet and listening to my other speakers, getting a lot of experience from them also, from their own space and where they sit. So yeah, I was speaking on the AFCFTA, right? So really developing intra-Africa trade is something that we can't really overemphasize, and it's very important. Like I will say, Africans must develop Africa, right? So if we want to see that development in Africa, we need to also commit ourselves to doing it. The people from the other continents and they will not really do it for us. And the AFCFTA, that's the African Continental Free Trade Area, is actually a very welcome development in the continent. And because the purpose and the mission of it is a good cause, actually, to help align, intra-Africa trade, to reduce barriers, to boost industrialization. We've seen a lot of countries sign up. We've seen a lot of countries making moves, to be part of it and to bring about an ease of transacting across African countries, right? Even in Nigeria recently, we gazetted the ECOWAS schedule of tariffs, so that will allow about zero duties on 90% of the tariffs under the AFCFTA, and it makes your goods more competitive, right? So in trade finance institutions are also coming on board, trying to see how to reduce the cost, how to increase trade facilitation for intra-Africa trade. Like Anthony had spoken on the single window system, a lot of like in Nigeria now, in Stanbic, we also have that kind of system here where the different agencies are linked together on a particular system, reduces the bottleneck, and some form of digitization that takes out those bureaucracies on paperwork and things like that. Now, for Stanbic IBTC, there's the Pan-African payment and settlement system, which AFREXIM launched some time back, to enable real-time cross-border payments. Stanbic IBTC has actually been signed up and we're enabled for the PAP system. So we're able to do seamless transfers across countries that have also been signed up, Ghana and a few other countries across. So what does that do? It reduces the cost, enables real-time cross-border payments, right, which a lot of the importers will want to see. It actually favors more of the SME clients because the amounts you can do there from a country perspective is small, quite all right, but it's a way forward, takes off the documentary requirements that you would need for larger transactions, right? And then the FX conversions, because under that system, you're able to, for example, if you're paying from Nigeria to Ghana, you would transfer Naira here and then you get the currency in Ghana, which is cedis. Same way, if you're sending from Ghana to Nigeria, you would transfer cedis and the recipient, the beneficiary here will receive Naira. So those are some of the systems that are being integrated, to encourage the AFCFTA and also participation of intra-Africa trade, right? There's also the trade credit guarantee systems, which are, helps to guarantee these businesses, these intra-African trade businesses, especially for SMEs, for new exporters, and then you asked that what are the roles of the fintech platform? Yes, the fintechs will always have to come in because the fintechs, there are quite a number of the MSMEs which the larger traditional banks might not be able to meet, right? So that is where they come in because for fintech platforms, just like YoGuPay and a few other ones like that, the documentary requirement is really very little. The KYC is very little. So some of those MSMEs are able to key in, for seamless transactions. Also for fintechs, you can get, transaction data for data analytics, for trades, which will also help offer real-time insights to either lenders, to exporters, also to identify trustworthy counterparties. We also need data because data is not so readily available. And I believe that with the fintechs collaborating with traditional banks, these are areas that we can actually develop, right? Co-lending, first loss guarantees from the insurance companies, also API integration. I think Anthony spoke on that. So those are some of the ways that we can align with the AFCFTA's ambition for a seamless, African market and for growth across the intra-Africa trade. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abdul. Thank you for that. That was well put. Thank you. So I would like us to move a bit from the AFCFTA and come to digital trade and payments innovation. And to you, Dr. Uche, digital platforms, just like Ms. Abdul mentioned, are reshaping how, goods and capital are moving across borders. What are the key data and cybersecurity concerns, especially since we mentioned it's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to, digital movement of trade? What are the key data and cybersecurity concerns that we need to address as digital trade accelerates across Africa?
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Sheila, and thank you very much. So, I mean, one thing I do want to start with is that at least 28% of African organizations experience breaches, even with like robust measures. And this is in terms of cybersecurity. And because Africa is experiencing rapid development in the digital space, which is raising cybersecurity concern as well, and we know that some recent studies show that at least losses exceed $4 billion annually. One thing is that we know African countries are at various stages of development or implementing digital transformation initiatives. So it has become, Africa is now a fertile hunting ground, for increasingly sophisticated cyber criminals. You will find that the number of internet users is expected to reach 1.1 billion by 2029. So that makes cybersecurity a very critical kind of issue in Africa. So in South Africa, there's this organization, the Alliance Risk Barometer, and they ranked cyber incidents as the second most dangerous risk after critical infrastructure blackout. So that tells you that this question you raised, Sheila, is really important in light of what should happen. We know that it's from ransomware to phishing, malware, data breaches, methods are varied and the results are often catastrophic for businesses. One thing is that currently Africa has like outdated legacy systems, inflexible manual security protocols, but most businesses are operating from that perspective, and they cannot keep pace with the enormous scale of data that is being produced. So what we have is that organizations find themselves on the receiving end of these things. So one way that just to really start thinking of your question is to address, one way to address that is to build digital security skill gaps. I would say that's one way. There is a shortage of that in Africa. So, and many people are starting to train to become experts in that area. But organizations find it difficult to maintain fully operational security operations centers, because they don't have the necessary expertise. So when with more people on the continent developing skills in that area, we would have people that will be able to sort out kind of sophisticated cybersecurity crimes. Then we're looking at regulatory challenges as well, so that needs to be dealt with. Is uneven. This is an issue that I think it's constantly being talked about, the uneven regulatory landscape. Countries like South Africa and Kenya, are leading in modern cybersecurity legislation. So that's good, but there are others that lag behind, and the inconsistency hinders cross-border efforts. So to combat cybersecurity crimes, particularly in regions where cyber criminals operate across multiple jurisdictions, what we need is to have, updated regulations. We don't want outdated regulations. Countries need to constantly, as this landscape is changing, as things are changing, countries need to update that. So South Africa has like the cyber directive and its joint standard with the FSCA, that requires that financial institutions maintain rigorous and cybersecurity policies and procedures. If you find that in countries where you know that cybersecurity is right, for example, the population of Nigeria, the youthful population, the kind of exposure that we're having requires that we have policies such as this, that SMEs, financial institutions that are housing a lot of the country's money, you have a rigorous cybersecurity policy and procedure in place is kind of important. We've also, in Nigeria, we've adopted our own cybersecurity regulation, like the CBN cybersecurity framework is just related to the CBN, but it is something that is commendable to address the rapidly increasing cyber crime rates. Then we have mobile vulnerability as well. So because there's rise in internet usage, and currently 76% of Africans are accessing the internet via their mobile devices. So it has led to increase in mobile-specific cyber attacks. That's what we're doing. So, and in East Africa in particular, we've seen significant risks in mobile money fraud, like, mobile malware and SIM swaps and things like that. I mean, those are to kind of deal with this, I would say upskilling, or rather people, would I say upskilling? I would just say, people having skill in cybersecurity, that skill is so important. And even in developed countries where you find that the systems are sophisticated. There's also even sophisticated knowledge of cybersecurity. You still find that there are constant cybersecurity attacks. The only difference is that those are kind of managed better than what we have, because their systems are more sophisticated. And then in terms of regulatory challenges, I would say there needs to be updated regulations as opposed to outdated regulations. And I think that's kind of one thing I want to talk about. And then in terms of data, I would say, so laws are very important. Laws on data protection laws are critical I cannot overemphasize it. I don't know if anybody is aware of the fine that Nigeria fined. Is it Meta now? I think yes. A really huge sum of money in the last week or so, just because of data protection violations, so data breaches. And they argued, they had this argument, that they were going to take some time to amend or adjust some things. But the board or the authority that sat on it and gave the decision was like, in the first place, you did not adhere to the laws that were in place. So if there are laws in place and there is violation, I think it's important to know that countries can set up a panel, similar to what has happened to some of these big tech organizations in Europe. They are able to find them and say, listen, you violated this. You took people's data. You didn't tell them what you were doing with the data. This is what you did. Having that sort of practical, but where people see it happening, it's encouraging. It's one way to address those kind of concerns, what people are doing with data, apart from having updated laws. So that's I hope that yeah, I hope that is sufficient for everyone.
Yes, sure. It is very sufficient. And it's like you peeped through my notes, because some of the next two questions that I was going to ask you already tackled while answering how we can bridge the digital divide and whatever is happening across cybersecurity. So I think I'll now move to my last question. And this is to all of you, and I'll start with Anthony. Fast forward 10 years from now, we're in 2035. What does a fully integrated African trade ecosystem look like to you? And what foundational decisions must we make today to ensure that we bring this vision to life? We move from paper to the ground.
Thank you, Sheila. I think 10 years from now, we are looking at a more integrated Africa and more developed in terms of technology. First, we will see, even if not fully, we'll see borderless digital trade with electronic customs, clearance, and e-certificates and so on, where we'll have multiple systems, e-commerce systems, where SMEs, government agencies can be able to do this in an automated area. And this again, as Uche is highlighting, the cyber and the regulation will have to go along it. So we need to the policy needs to follow the technology and the trade space. The other thing is we'll see a growth in a Pan-African digital ID for traders, where I can be registered in Kenya, but I am able to trade anywhere across Africa. Currently, the migration protocols and the movement protocols and mobility is still a challenge, but we have the free movement of persons protocol at African Union. It has not been ratified by a lot of countries. The hope is that by 2030, we can have all the African countries that ratify this free movement of persons, and we'll have Pan-African digital IDs where as long as I'm African, I can work anywhere, I can trade anywhere, and I can be able to sell anywhere. Then the issue of smart ports, AI-enabled logistics corridors, where ports, which currently we have some countries that are already automated, others are starting to automate. But in 10 years' time, we'll have the ones that have integrated this AI technology to their port system and customs and movement, where you can be able to apply for documentation using AI-based platforms and so on and so on. Then real-time trade data for policy decisions. At KenTrade, we have been able to implement a business intelligence tool, which is reading directly from the single window system. All the trade that comes to Kenya, export or import, is going through the single window system. So we have a lot of data. So we saw there's a need for real-time decision making on international trade. Whenever the ministry wants to gazette a new policy, they call upon us to share this real-time data from the BI business intelligence tool. And we have only started implementing it, and this will be the case for other single window, Asikuda, and other automation levels, because the byproduct of automation is data, availability of real-time data, and we'll be able to have that. But what do we need to do to get here? Again, we need to invest in digital infrastructure, in harmonized trade laws and other policies that are needed. Again, ratify and implement. Ratification has happened in majority of almost every African countries, but implementation is where the challenge is. We need to ratify the AFCFTA and implement it fully. Then build capacity and support regional interoperability of technologies and other policies, and ensure the harmonization of policies across the regional economic communities, and that you don't have to move from one place to another and find different laws that are different from where you're originating from. And finally, you need to have an integration in political alignment, where if we can move in one direction. Thank you, Sheila.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Ifoma, could you please give us your point of view on the same?
All right, thank you, Sheila. 10 years time. It looks very far, but I don't think it's that far.
Yeah.
So, how do I see a fully integrated African trade ecosystem? Similar to what Anthony has said, seamless cross-border payments, right? Just the same way you would be sending a text from Nigeria and I get to you in Kenya, so we should be able to do seamless cross-border trade across Africa. Also digitization of ports, of customs, logistics, that makes it easier for goods to move across different ports and different borders, right? Harmonized tariffs, custom-powered AI, customs, smart customs, powered by AIs and all that. Also policy harmonization, like I said earlier, and then improve access to trade finance, inclusion, women-led businesses, youth entrepreneurs, rural producers, so we need them to also have access to easy finance. At Stanbic, we have started that in terms of easy access to and inclusion. We have women-led businesses that we have special packages for. We have financing for youths and entrepreneurs, for farmers. We have some form of financing for them. So we see more of that within the next 10 years. So generally, the right handshake between traditional banks and the fintechs, is what will bring this advancement faster than we even think. So to achieve this, what do we need to do? We need to invest in digital infrastructure. My colleagues have spoken a lot about the AFCFTA implementations. More countries need to come on board and begin to implement, right? And then enhance financial inclusion, better collaboration amongst all the parties that are involved, and then for the traditional banks, also relax some of those regulatory requirements, and roadblocks to allow for seamless transacting. So I think that's what I would say. I would also still say that Africa is for us to develop, so we should look towards playing our own parts to ensure that we get to that point where other more developed countries are, and we do actually have the potential to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Uche, what's your perspective?
So I would say, when I was just thinking of it, I thought to myself, just to have like I mean the way I couch it is to say, put it this way, the critical question will be, what do we need to do to create a seamless and efficient system? And I think that Ifoma and Anthony have really dealt with almost all aspects of what is required to have a system. But I think for me, really, what I was thinking about with this question as they were talking is that, you want, in practical terms, you just want somebody who has a thriving business in Nigeria to be able to go to Kenya and, sell a woman, a youth, anybody that has an idea, or even if it's not goods, services, you want to offer services, and you don't want barriers, you don't want things that would hinder the services. And so the key word would be seamless, and then, followed by efficient. Those are words that we can remove, from an African trade ecosystem. What I would like to add, because I think they've dealt with it sufficiently, is I would think about investment promotion, it's a key pillar for Africa's economic transformation, because they are aiming to have these hubs like the African Trade Center in many countries in Africa. So having that sort of thing in place where you have, it is almost a practical representation of what you want to happen in terms of facilitating trade. You want something that creates like a seamless trade. You want something that is efficient. You want something that somebody can walk into and say, okay, I want to do this and I want to do that. And that person is guided, and that person can accomplish those things. So I think I would say that having a physical sort of, a physical infrastructure, something that is physical, that can drive things that we've talked about, removing tariffs, making sure that, people understand the laws, they are guided. Having that in a physical form is also a critical aspect of making sure that trade in Africa or intra-African trade is seamless and efficient. So I do think that, where we're going in the future, in 10 years, I can see the effort that is being put into having an African trade ecosystem that is functional, where in 10 years' time, I do think that substantial progress, would have been made. What I worry about is, you make some progress and then progress stalls. Is that going to be it in 5 years' time? Is it going to be all this money that is being expended, in laws, implementation, and like this? How is it going to really stay long term? So I think that the key addressing, having a strong African trade ecosystem, and making sure we have that in 10 years is continuity, is continuing with efforts that are being put in, not kind of lagging, because that is one thing that on the continent that we struggle with things stall. That's kind of it for me.
Okay.
I definitely know that all of what they've said, harmonization of laws, making those are brilliant. Those are things that if we get them right, then we can start kind of driving, that trade ecosystem that we're looking to. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Uche. That was well answered as well. I'd like us to go to the questions that we're receiving from the people who joined. And I'll start with a question that Kwaku posed. And I'd like Anthony Kamau to help us answer this. Kwaku is asking, how can we leverage some of the solutions in solving current tariff issues globally? Anthony?
Thank you. Uh, Thank you, Sheila. On resolution of issues of tariffs, this is a matter of political will. Trade agreements, if you talk about at African level, at regional level, uh, we have the AGOA with the US and Africa, and so on and so on. But the problem usually is there a will for the sitting administration to implement this fully? Does it contradict with their political standing? Previously, when Biden was there, we did not have in the US having these trade wars. Then the new administration came for Trump, and now the tariff was started again. We have as Kenya, we have properly agreements at East African level with our neighbors, Tanzania, Uganda, and all the others. But usually here issues, Kenya has banned importation of milk from Uganda. And that's a contradiction of trade. Not sorry for when you talk about tariffs, very delicate. And it's in sometimes by year. I remember listening to when he was being lobbied by Ugandan business community that he should ban importation of rice from Tanzania. But we have a trade agreement and it should be targeting this small industry of rice against importation of rice from Tanzania. Tanzania will again that we need to see how it will go. The big is as Africans, will the AGOA be renewed? Challenge with Trump and the current climate of tariffs, we are not about that, and that will affect.
I think we lost him, Anthony.
Sorry, I'm back.
Okay.
I think it was a network issue.
Were you done? Please proceed.
Yeah, I was finalizing to say that it's a political will in regards to tariffs, and now the jitters that are there for the current because of the Trump tariff wars, we have issues of AGOA where we've had over 20 years trading freely with America, but now with Trump AGOA coming to an end towards the end of this year, it may not be renewed. And that means that African businesses need to focus more now on trading within Africa rather than outside. Yeah, again, yeah, it's a political will on issues of tariff.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Kwako, if you are satisfied with the response, please just let us know in the chat box. Kwako also gave a comment on the AFCFTA, and he said, I think the AFCFTA is doing well. Awareness needs to be scaled up. Only a few elite are aware. So he was agreeing with us that many people on the ground are not aware of whatever the AFCFTA is doing. And so indeed, digital literacy will be needed to also help, especially most people who are dealing in international trade, to be aware of what this body is doing and how they can leverage it in their day-to-day businesses.
Alpha.
Please mute the person who's talking. Hello. Please mute.
I don't think they changed the mode of payment. They didn't change it.
Okay.
They didn't change it because I've tried to check too. Nobody has.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. So Raymond was saying that he was hoping that we have someone from Secretariat noting down the recommendations, especially around awareness. Yes, indeed, we have someone noting that down, and we will be putting out a proper report at the end of this webinar so that you can all have access. And then as we help bridge also the gap in financial inclusion that will be provided as well. Kwaku asked again, do you partner with other DFIs like IFC, AFDB as well? I think these, Ms. Abdul, you'll give us an answer to this. Do you partner with other DFIs like IFC and AFDB as well?
Oh yes, we do partner with other DFIs to provide solutions for our SMEs and also for our customers in terms of financing. So yes, we do. There's quite a wide range of financial institutions that the Standard Bank Group actually partner with. So yeah, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, Stanbic is actually part of the Standard Bank Group, which is the largest bank in Africa. So yes, we do.
Okay, thank you so much. Tokunbo, I really hope I've mentioned your name well, is asking, will a single trade currency help to promote cross-border trading in Africa? It was mentioned at a time by the AU. Any tractions on this, Uche? Are there any tractions on this?
Well, so start with her. Just looking at her question. Yes, so yeah, a single currency could simplify and reduce, it could simplify trade and really reduce currency exchange costs, and potentially, it can actually boost integration and growth within the region. But the problem is that this has been, yes, you're correct that it was mentioned a while back, and it has been in the works, but there's been challenges and delays with, like I would talk about, the ECHO, which is by 15 states, ECOWAS states. So there was initial plan for the ECHO, and then it's been postponed several times. Nobody really knows what is happening. But at first, there were things like economic instability. They said political issues, then COVID-19 came. But as of September 2024, what we know is that they suspended. So ECOWAS has suspended the plan for the ECO due to lack of progress. And then some member states departed. I do know that people are aware of the departure by some of the states just because of the kind of issues. Well, I wouldn't go into that, political issues, so it's been suspended. What I would say is that whilst it is a useful thing to have, but it's a huge project to undertake. If you look at the euro, is quite useful. But if you look at what we have, and I think Ifeoma did mention PAPS, the Pan-African payment systems, that works. That works. So it may not be necessary to have like a single currency. It may not be, I'm not saying that it's not useful. I'm saying that yes, a single currency, it can be very useful. But what is what the real question is how useful compared to the tediousness of driving that sort of project. So you want to wait. Proportionality is important in this regard, especially since we have the PAPs, and we know that Stanbic IBTC Bank they've said that Ifeoma said that they are taking payments on the PAPs, and yeah. So that's the way I would put it. For the ECO, it's been suspended, so that's it looks like it's not going to happen anytime soon, but we're not disadvantaged in that sense. Seamless trade can still go on with what we have going on with PAPs, and with what is with the drive on with AFTA and the laws. So yeah, that is that is the traction I have for the ECO. But you must also think about other countries that have their own, that have tried to get their own single currency. Have they been successful? Not really as well. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Thank you for that contribution. Do we still have anyone with a pressing question or with any remarks they would like to make before we call this a day? If you have any question, please just drop it.
Sorry, Sheila.
Hi. Who am I talking to?
Hi, Sheila.
Hi.
On the the comment Uche made with regards to the single trade currency. Just my own view, I think it would actually have been a good one if Africa can actually have a single currency, right? So it takes out um, the pressures and the dependencies on the third currencies, because as it is today, virtually every African currency is a third currency, right? So even when you're transacting in Africa, intra-Africa, you're still dependent on the other European currencies, right? So even when you're talking about settling PAPs, how do you settle? You still settle at the back end, still with the third currency,
Yeah.
So if it actually works, I believe that it will help push the trade for Africa. It will, reduce some of those dependencies on outside, in terms of the financing and the FX conversions and that. But let's see how far it goes. At least if the echo goes through, then there may be maybe other regions that will want to come up with their own currency. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for that addition, Abdul. Thank you so much for that. I think Kwako has asked, will the recording be shared? Yes, be on the lookout on our channels, YogoPay. The recording will be shared on our social channels, and we will do a breakdown as well of this conversation we've just had and a report. So be on the lookout this coming week. All that will be shared. And I want to say thank you so much. Without any other question. Okay, I see there's something on the chat. Okay. It's Tokumbo is just affirming me that I did not murder her name. She's saying thank you to the panelists for the insightful contributions, and she's saying thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tokumbo, for noting that. Thank you so much. Yes, you can share your emails so that we can also link up. As Ms. Abdul said, these challenges that we've just talked about, these solutions, we are the ones who will bring them to fruition. No one is coming to save us. We have to be the people who are spearheading, looking at the challenges, looking at the solutions, looking at the opportunities, and spearheading them so that we ensure that Africa trade moves and African businesses also get to enjoy what other nations or other continents are enjoying as in terms of trade and international trade. So thank you so much for everyone who joined. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for signing up. Thank you so much for being with us today. Yeah, sorry, sir. Tokumbo is a guy and not a lady. Sorry, sir. Yes. Thank you so much. I think I'll have to visit Nigeria so that I learn these things better. To the panelists, I want to also air out my heartfelt thank you for the rich insights and actionable ideas that you've provided. And one thing is clear from today's conversation, that the road to a frictionless African trade system will be paved, number one, with policy reforms, financial innovation and technology, and also, like they all said, we are the ones to spearhead this. No one else will do it for us. And at YogoPay, we are committed to breaking down the payment barriers that are slowing international trade in Africa and beyond. So whether you are an exporter in Nairobi or an importer in Lagos, we make cross-border payments seamless, fast and stress-free for you. So feel free to also interact with us if you're in international trade, or if you want to partner with us to help, especially like we said, we will need private sector partnerships as well to ensure that we are also working together to move this narrative forward. So for everyone today, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for interacting with us. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comments, for the corrections. Thank you so much. I will be looking forward to having you in our next webinar. So be on the lookout on our pages. Please feel free to interact with our panelists, Uche, Anyamele, Ithoma, Abdul, Anthony, Kamau on their LinkedIn pages. You can see they have a lot of wealth as regards international trade. And we know the 1 hour or 1 hour, 30 minutes may not be enough. So they are always sharing insights on their LinkedIn pages. So feel free to also interact with them on there. And let's keep the conversation going. So thank you, everyone, and have a lovely, lovely evening and weekend.
Thank you, Sheila, and well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
You. All right. Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
time.
Have a lovely time. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.